I was still chewing the last bite of my lunch when I caught a glimpse of something strange through the glass wall of the break room. Two men in dark suits were standing at my cubicle. They were not from my department. They were not even from our floor. Both carried black folders and wore that rigid posture that screams authority. My fork froze halfway to the trash bin. One of them was already sliding open my desk drawers, while the other leaned over my computer screen and began taking photos. The air around me shifted. I knew instantly that this was not a drill. This was not random. My chest tightened with recognition because there was only one person in this entire building who would ever want something like this to happen. Clara Voss. I walked out slowly, careful to keep my face neutral, my voice steady. My coworkers had started to notice. Heads turned above the gray partitions. Someone whispered my name as I approached. The taller officer looked up as I reached my cubicle. His eyes were flat, professional. "Miss Riley, we are conducting a compliance inspection." "Routine inspection?" I asked, almost politely, though the question dripped with disbelief. The shorter officer read from his notes without lifting his eyes. Reports of unprofessional conduct, repeated errors in client communications, and potential safety hazards in workspace organization. I kept my lips pressed together, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Over the officer's shoulder, 3 cubicles away, stood Clara. She pretended to be occupied with a stack of files, yet I could feel her gaze burning into me, waiting for me to collapse. She had been building toward this day for months. They asked me to step aside. Apparently, I could not return to my desk until they completed the inspection. My chair, my files, my computer, all suddenly became forbidden territory. I leaned against the partition and folded my arms as if I had all the time in the world. If Clara expected tears or panic, she would be disappointed. I did not need anyone to explain who had reported me. Clara had arrived at the company 2 years after me, ambitious from the first day, ambitious enough to see me not as a colleague, but as an obstacle. She corrected me in front of clients, double-checked every word I said in meetings, and sent emails with my supervisor copied in where she dissected imaginary mistakes in my phrasing. She was not content with being good. She wanted to be seen as better than everyone else, especially me. For months she had been watching me with the patience of a predator. What time I arrived, how long I stayed at lunch, what files I touched, which phone calls I took. Every detail of my day, no matter how insignificant, was logged somewhere behind those calculating eyes. I realized early on that she was not simply competitive. She was constructing a case, a slow and methodical attack. She needed me to fall so that she could climb. And here it was, the collapse she had engineered. Or at least, the collapse she thought she had engineered. That afternoon, as the officers pulled open each drawer and documented each file, I reminded myself of something I had started long before Clara's obsession became this visible. A small leather notebook sat quietly in the bottom drawer, not hidden, just resting there among pens and staplers. To Clara, it would mean nothing, or perhaps she might think it was another weakness to exploit. To me, it was the most powerful thing I had ever carried into this office. It was my gratitude journal. I began writing in it 1 year earlier after listening to a podcast on productivity and mental health. At first, it was just an experiment. Each evening before leaving work, I forced myself to record 3 positive things that had happened that day. A client who thanked me for quick follow-up. A colleague who helped me untangle a spreadsheet formula. Even the security guard who held the door for me during a storm. Small, ordinary moments of kindness that kept the weight of corporate life from crushing me. Over time, the habit grew into something more. The notebook became a map of the invisible threads that kept our workplace alive. It was proof that kindness mattered, that collaboration mattered, that the little gestures we so often overlook are what give our days meaning. Clara's name never appeared in those pages, not once, and that was the detail that would change everything. I did not know it yet, standing in the middle of the office with everyone watching, but the notebook was about to speak louder than any accusation Clara could invent. As the shorter officer opened the bottom drawer and pulled it out, I felt every eye in the room tighten on me. He flipped through the pages, his brows moving slightly as he read. Then he passed the notebook to his partner. They whispered to each other, too quiet for me to hear. Clara shifted closer, curiosity breaking through her mask of calm. She wanted to know what they were reading. She wanted to know why their attention lingered so long on something she did not recognize. And in that moment, for the first time in months, I felt the balance of power tilt ever so slightly in my favor. The taller officer continued flipping through my notebook, his expression unreadable. The office had gone unnaturally quiet. Phones still rang, emails still pinged, printers still spat out contracts, but everyone's focus was drawn here, to this strange theater staged at my cubicle. I could sense the tension rolling across the floor like a low hum. I glanced at Clara. She had positioned herself close enough to appear casually observant, but far enough to deny that she was eavesdropping. Her lips were pressed together in what she must have believed was a mask of professional composure, yet her eyes betrayed her. They shone with the eager anticipation of a gambler who had placed every chip on red. I wondered briefly how long she had prepared for this moment. Weeks, months. I pictured her evenings, hunched over a folder at her dining table, highlighting every slip of paper that could be twisted against me. I could almost see her satisfaction each time she printed another email of mine, another screenshot, another invented piece of incompetence. For Clara, this was more than ambition. It was theater. It was vengeance against a rival who had never agreed to play her game. The officers finally set the notebook down on the desk. The shorter one looked at me. "Miss Riley, how long have you been keeping this journal?" "About a year and a half," I replied evenly. "Are the entries genuine?" he asked. "No exaggerations or inventions?" I smiled faintly. "They are just small notes to myself. Little things that made the day better." He nodded, exchanging another glance with his partner. Something had shifted. I could not name it, but the air had changed from accusation to curiosity. Clara must have sensed it too, because her posture stiffened. She took a small, involuntary step forward. The taller officer noticed. His gaze snapped toward her. "Miss Voss, we will need to speak with you shortly." The color drained from her face so quickly that for a heartbeat I almost felt pity. Almost. The officers stepped aside, leaving me in a limbo between relief and confusion. My coworkers whispered from behind their cubicles. I caught the faint outline of Daniel from accounting craning his neck to see the notebook. Alicia from HR pretended to shuffle papers while staring directly at me. Even Mr. Walsh, our department head, had appeared at the end of the aisle, arms crossed, watching silently. The shorter officer motioned for Clara to follow him into a glass-walled conference room. She moved stiffly, like someone walking into her own trial. The door closed behind them. Through the transparent wall, I could see gestures, expressions, fragments of a conversation too muffled to reach us. Clara's confident mask dissolved within minutes. Her eyes widened, her lips trembled, her hands moved in sharp, defensive motions. I pretended to busy myself with emails, but my heart was beating so hard it shook through my ribs. What were they asking her? What had they seen in those pages that rattled her so deeply? After what felt like an eternity, the taller officer returned to my desk. "Miss Riley," he said, "this inspection is concluded. We found no evidence of misconduct. You may continue your work." He paused, studying me carefully. However, he added, "We did uncover something else. Something we believe deserves attention." He lifted my notebook gently and tapped the cover. "In 18 months of entries, you mentioned dozens of colleagues by name. Supervisors, clients, assistants, even the cleaning staff. Dozens of people who made your workdays brighter." I nodded slowly, unsure where he was heading. "One name is absent," he said. "Miss Voss never appears, not once." The statement landed in the air like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples of silence spread through the office. Every ear strained to catch my reply. I hesitated. "That was not intentional," I said quietly. "I only wrote down genuine moments of kindness or professionalism." If someone did not appear, it was because there was nothing to record. The officer nodded. "We understand. And we think Miss Voss understands now too." He handed the notebook back to me and walked away. The taller one followed. Their shoes clicked across the floor, fading into the elevator lobby. The whispers erupted the moment the door closed. I felt the weight of 100 eyes, some curious, some sympathetic, some shocked. Clara remained in the conference room, her head bowed, her face hidden in her hands. That night, long after I left the office, I sat alone in my apartment replaying the scene. The satisfaction of surviving Clara's trap warred with unease. She had invested too much effort to surrender this easily. Someone like Clara would not vanish quietly. She would return, and when she did, her tactics would be sharper, subtler, more poisonous. I placed the notebook on my nightstand. My hands lingered on the worn leather cover. It had begun as a private habit, a shield against cynicism, but today it had become something else. A mirror, a weapon Clara could never have anticipated. As I drifted into sleep, I whispered a promise to myself. This is not over. Tomorrow, the real story begins. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. The building was still half asleep. the lobby echoing with the sound of janitors pushing their carts and the faint hum of the security system switching into daytime mode. I swiped my badge, walked across the polished floor, and tried to shake off the heaviness that had settled in my chest overnight. Nothing looked different on the surface. Same glass elevators, same steel beams stretching toward the atrium skylight, same potted plants that had somehow survived years of fluorescent lighting. But I felt different walking in. Yesterday, the entire office had seen my name pulled into an investigation. They had seen my desk raided. They had seen Clara escorted into that conference room. In a place where rumors traveled faster than email, what story would they be telling today? I kept my steps even, my chin level, as if my calm could will itself into reality. When the elevator doors opened onto our floor, I felt dozens of eyes swing toward me. Some greeted me with hesitant smiles. Others looked away quickly, pretending they had not been waiting. The hum of whispered conversations followed me down the hall. My cubicle stood untouched, my chair tucked in, my files neatly stacked, my computer monitor dark and waiting. But on the corner of my desk, someone had left a small paper cup. Steam rose from it, carrying the unmistakable scent of cinnamon. I picked it up. Written on the side in black marker were the words, "Hang in there, no name, no clue." Just the quiet kindness of someone who wanted me to know I was not alone. I sat down, heart softened, and opened my computer. Of course, Clara arrived exactly on time, as if nothing had happened. Her heels clicked across the carpet, her blazer crisp, her hair tied in its usual sleek knot. But her face betrayed the truth. She forced a polite hello to those she passed, but her voice was hollow. The vibrant arrogance she once carried had dulled. She avoided my cubicle completely. Instead, she dropped her bag and started typing furiously, as though drowning herself in work could erase the memory of yesterday's humiliation. I should have felt victorious, but instead I felt the sharp edge of vigilance. Clara was too stubborn to stop here. I knew her pattern. When direct confrontation failed, she shifted strategies. She did not retreat, she recalibrated. As the morning unfolded, I thought back to how this all began. Clara had entered the company nearly 2 years after me. On her first day, she strode into the office as if the building had been waiting for her arrival. She smiled at everyone, but her eyes scanned constantly, measuring, comparing, ranking. At first, I admired her energy. She volunteered for every project, spoke up in every meeting, stayed late to impress supervisors. But admiration turned to discomfort the moment she decided I was her benchmark. If I stayed until 7, she stayed until 8. If I landed a client, she rushed to poach a bigger one. If I spoke in a meeting, she interrupted with corrections disguised as clarifications. Her obsession with me was relentless. She memorized the timing of my breaks, the way I structured my emails, even the brands of pens I used. She called it dedication. I called it surveillance. At some point, I realized she was not simply competing. She was documenting. She kept files. I had glimpsed them once when I passed her desk and saw my own name typed across a folder on her screen. Inside, I imagined, were screenshots, copied emails, little notes cataloging every typo or misstep she could weaponize. Most people would have confronted her. Most people would have fought back. I chose a different path. That was when I started the gratitude journal. It had seemed like such a small thing at first. A simple notebook with a soft leather cover, bought from a street vendor on a rainy evening when I needed distraction. I had read about the practice on a podcast. Write down 3 good things every day, no matter how small, and your brain will learn to notice the positive more easily. So I tried. On the first page I wrote, 1. Daniel helped me debug the new software. 2. Mrs. Patel sent a thank you card for resolving her claim quickly. 3. Alicia left an extra muffin on my desk because she knew I skipped breakfast. 3 lines, that was all. But when I closed the notebook, the heaviness of the day seemed lighter. The habit grew. I wrote every evening, sometimes scribbling just before running to catch the train, sometimes sitting in the quiet office long after everyone had left. Each entry was a snapshot of kindness, a record of human connection. Daniel showed up often. So did Alicia. Even Mr. Walsh, stern but fair, earned repeated mentions. Security guards, cleaning staff, clients, interns, page after page filled with gratitude. But never Clara. The absence had not been intentional. I had no rule to exclude her. I simply wrote what was true. And the truth was she had never offered a gesture of kindness, never shared credit, never given help without expecting applause. In over 18 months, there had been nothing to record. Yesterday, the officers had noticed that absence. Clara had noticed it too. I could see it in the way her face crumpled behind the glass wall of the conference room. She thought she was exposing me, but in reality, I had already exposed her without meaning to. Now, sitting at my desk with the mysterious cinnamon coffee warming my hands, I understood the situation more clearly. Clara would never forgive me for surviving her trap. She would strike again, but differently. The question was how. By noon, the answer began to reveal itself. I overheard Daniel whispering with Alicia near the break room. Their voices were low, cautious, but I caught my own name. When I walked in, they cut the conversation short and smiled nervously. I let it go, but my pulse quickened. Later, during a client call, I noticed Clara pacing behind me, phone pressed to her ear. She spoke loudly, just enough for others to hear, dropping my name mid-sentence as though I were an example in her conversation. Her tone was clipped, skeptical, as if she were discussing a problem she was trying to solve. By 3 o'clock, the rumors reached me directly. A colleague from another department leaned in as I passed her desk. "So, is it true you're writing about everyone?" she asked in a half-joking, half-nervous voice. I forced a smile. "Writing about everyone?" she shrugged. "That you're keeping notes." And just like that, I knew Clara's next strategy. The question from my colleague kept echoing in my head long after I returned to my cubicle. Was I writing about everyone? The words were innocent enough, but the way she asked them carried weight. There was hesitation, even suspicion, as though she wanted me to confirm something she half believed but did not fully understand. That was Clara's talent. She never swung a hammer. She planted seeds. Tiny, poisonous suggestions that grew roots in the minds of others. She had failed to destroy me through formal channels, so now she would try the informal ones. If she could not convince the officers, she would convince the people who sat next to me every day. By the end of the week, I began to notice small shifts. Alicia, who usually lingered to chat after meetings, now packed her things quickly and hurried off. Daniel's emails, once sprinkled with jokes and friendly comments, grew shorter and more formal. Even the security guard at the lobby desk, who always greeted me with a cheerful nod, gave only a restrained smile before returning to his clipboard. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I could feel the distance stretching. Clara was winning again, not by proving me incompetent, but by making others wonder if I was untrustworthy. One evening I stayed late, the office nearly empty, the glow of the city beyond the windows casting pale rectangles of light on the carpet. I opened my journal and flipped through the pages. Dozens of names, dozens of moments, none of them harmful, all of them small acts of kindness I had wanted to remember. And yet, under Clara's narrative, these simple entries could be painted as sinister. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling tiles. I had two choices. I could march into Mr. Walsh's office and defend myself, but that would sound defensive and paranoid, feeding exactly the image Clara was trying to paint. Or I could do something else, something Clara would never expect. The decision came slowly, but once it formed, it felt inevitable. If Clara was trying to turn my journal into a secret weapon against me, I would strip it of secrecy altogether. The following Monday, before the day grew noisy, I composed an email to the entire department. The subject line was simple: personal journal, transparency, and consent. I kept the message short and honest. I explained that I had been keeping a personal gratitude journal for over a year, where I occasionally noted positive interactions at work. I clarified that it was purely personal, never shared with supervisors or management, and that it existed only to remind me to focus on good moments. I acknowledged that some people might feel uncomfortable with this practice. If anyone preferred not to be included, I promised to respect that completely. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I clicked it, the words would leave my control. Clara would certainly read them, twist them, mock them, but I realized something important. Clara thrived in the shadows, in whispers and half-truths. She had no power in daylight. I clicked send. The response was faster than I expected. Within the hour, messages began to fill my inbox. The first was from Alicia. She wrote, "I had no idea you were writing about moments like that. Honestly, I think it is wonderful. Please do not stop." It means a lot to know small things are noticed. Then Daniel replied. He said, "Keep writing. If more of us paid attention to gratitude instead of mistakes, this office would be a better place." One by one, the emails arrived. People who had never spoken much to me before wrote to say they appreciated the idea. Some asked for tips on starting their own journals. Others shared small stories of kindness they had received and never forgot. By the end of the day, I had 37 replies. 36 were supportive, kind, even enthusiastic. Only one person remained silent. Clara. Her silence roared louder than all the words combined. That week, something shifted in the atmosphere of the office. It was subtle at first, like a new scent in the air, but it grew stronger each day. People began leaving little notes of thanks on each other's desks. Daniel brought cookies to share during a stressful deadline and left a card saying he appreciated working with all of us. Mr. Walsh started team meetings by acknowledging someone's effort before diving into the agenda. It was as though my simple habit had cracked open a hidden reservoir of goodwill, and now it was spilling across the office. Gratitude had become contagious, and in that new environment, Clara's behavior became impossible to ignore. Her constant corrections, her thinly veiled criticism, her competitive interruptions all looked sharper, colder, more unnatural in contrast to the warmth around her. She tried to adapt. She forced herself to say thank you, but it rang hollow. She attempted compliments, but they landed as backhanded remarks that left people uncomfortable. She even announced she was starting her own gratitude practice, but her entries focused on her own brilliance rather than acknowledging others. The office saw through it. I saw through it. Clara was trying to mimic kindness the way an actor mimics a language they do not speak. And for the first time since she arrived, she was no longer feared, admired, or even envied. She was simply out of place. Late one evening, as I wrote in my journal, I realized what had happened. I had not defeated Clara in battle. I had not dismantled her schemes with strategy. I had simply created an environment where her toxicity could not survive. And that, I thought, was the quietest and most powerful revenge of all. 3 days after I sent the email, the office felt like a different world. There was laughter in corners that had been silent for months. People stopped by each other's desks not only to exchange files, but also to share small words of appreciation. For a place once driven by deadlines and competition, the shift was almost miraculous. I should have felt safe in that environment, but my instincts refused to relax. Clara had gone quiet, and quiet was never a good sign. She came in at 9 sharp, left at 5, spoke little, smiled politely, but her silence was not surrender. It was calculation. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. She was no longer interrupting meetings or broadcasting her knowledge to the floor, yet there was a tension in her shoulders that betrayed how hard she was holding herself together. She sat straighter than anyone, typed faster than necessary, nodded too eagerly at every instruction from supervisors. She was performing normalcy, and I knew it. I reminded myself that predators often crouch lower before they strike. The confirmation of my suspicion came one afternoon when Daniel stopped by my desk on his way back from the break room. He set down his coffee and spoke in a low voice. "London, can I ask you something strange?" "Of course," I said. "Has Clara been asking people about your journal?" I froze. "What do you mean?" "She cornered me yesterday while I was making tea," Daniel explained. "She asked whether I knew you were writing about people at work, whether I thought it was professional, whether I was comfortable with my personal interactions being documented without my consent." A cold weight settled in my chest. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth," Daniel said, "that I think it is nice someone notices kindness and that it never felt invasive. But London, she is not only asking me. She has been talking to Alicia, to Walsh, even to people from other departments. She is framing it as a privacy issue." I leaned back in my chair, staring at him. Clara was relentless. She had turned my strength into her new weapon, twisting appreciation into surveillance, kindness into intrusion. "Has anyone seemed convinced?" I asked. Daniel shook his head. "Not really. But she is persistent. She plants doubts like seeds. You know how she operates," I nodded slowly. I did know. Clara never needed people to fully believe her. She only needed them to wonder. For the next few days, I paid close attention to how people interacted with me. I searched for signs of distance, hesitation, mistrust. At first, everything seemed unchanged. Alicia still greeted me warmly in the mornings. Daniel still sent quick jokes in his messages, but by Friday, the cracks began to show. Alicia, usually quick to stop by for a chat, seemed busier than ever. Walsh's replies to my emails became clipped, stripped of his usual warmth. Even the security guard downstairs, who had always shared a cheerful good morning, now simply nodded with stiff formality. Clara was poisoning the well one drop at a time. I spent that weekend alone, the journal open on my coffee table. Page after page reminded me of the good things that had once filled the office. I wanted to believe that those moments were stronger than Clara's whispers, but belief alone was not enough. I considered confronting her directly, but that would give her exactly what she wanted, a display of defensiveness. I considered ignoring her, but silence would allow her seeds to grow unchecked. What I needed was something unexpected, something that turned her weapon back on her. The idea came late Sunday night, as I wrote my 3 daily notes. I realized I did not have to defend myself in secret. I could take everything Clara was trying to twist and drag it fully into the light. I would not fight her in the shadows. I would fight her with honesty. Monday morning, I arrived early, coffee in hand, and drafted another email. Not just to my department this time, but to the entire floor. I titled it simply, Gratitude, Practice, and Clarity. I explained once more what the journal was, why I kept it, and how it had begun long before Clara's campaign against me. I wrote that I valued transparency, and that if anyone felt uncomfortable being mentioned in my private notes, I would gladly exclude them without question. I assured everyone that the journal was personal, never shared, never weaponized, only a reminder to notice the good things that so often go unseen. Before I hit send, I read the message 3 times. Clara would hate this. She wanted secrecy to fuel suspicion. By exposing everything, I was cutting off her oxygen. I pressed send. Within minutes, responses poured in. Anna from the legal team replied first. I think this is beautiful. Please do not stop. It inspires me. Then came a message from one of the assistants. Knowing that my small efforts might brighten someone's page in your journal makes me feel valued. Even Walsh wrote a formal note. Miss Riley, your practice demonstrates professionalism and resilience. I appreciate your decision to address this openly. By lunchtime, my inbox was overflowing. Out of more than 40 responses, only one person had not replied. Clara. Her silence spoke volumes. That afternoon, as I walked through the office, I felt the energy shift around me. People smiled as I passed. Someone left a sticky note on my monitor that said simply, "Thank you for being you." The rumor Clara had tried to spread had collapsed under the weight of transparency. But something even more surprising began to happen. People started their own versions of the practice. Alicia left little thank you cards on desks. Daniel began posting weekly shoutouts on the company intranet. Walsh opened team meetings by highlighting someone's effort. Gratitude had become more than my habit. It had become our culture. And in this culture, Clara's behavior grew sharper, more obvious, impossible to disguise. Her fake compliments, her forced smiles, her attempts to join the trend only highlighted how out of step she was. For the first time, the entire office saw her not as ambitious or competitive, but as hollow. I sat at my desk that evening, journal open, pen poised, watching Clara pack her things. She avoided eye contact with everyone, her movements stiff, mechanical. She looked less like a predator and more like someone drowning in an environment she could not control. I wrote my 3 entries. 1. Alicia thanked me with a card that made me smile all day. 2. Daniel told me my openness gave him courage to share more with others. 3. Clara, I paused, pen hovering. I wanted to write something about her. But no moment of kindness came to mind. So I closed the notebook and whispered to myself, not today. By the middle of the following week, the office felt like 2 different worlds overlapping. On one side was the new culture of gratitude. People shared snacks during meetings, left cheerful notes for each other, and even created a digital board where anyone could post a thank you to a colleague. It was light, hopeful, and strangely contagious. On the other side stood Clara, frozen in place like a statue from another era. She still came in every morning exactly on time. She still wore her polished suits and carried her expensive leather planner. She still typed furiously, as if speed could substitute for warmth. But no matter how she tried, she could not adapt to the shift happening around her. She said thank you, but the words sounded stiff, rehearsed. She gave compliments, but they came out as judgments wrapped in sugar. She even tried to organize a gratitude circle at lunch, but the stories she told were all about her own brilliance rather than anyone else's. The office noticed. The smiles that once turned toward her now drifted elsewhere. The conversations she tried to join slipped away the moment she spoke. For the first time since she had walked into this company, Clara Voss was no longer a presence to fear or admire. She was simply unwanted noise. One morning, Mr. Walsh called me into his office. I stepped inside, half expecting to be asked about a client or a report, but instead he gestured for me to sit. His expression was thoughtful, his usual sternness softened. London, he began, I want to thank you. The word startled me. Thank me? Yes. Since your email, I have noticed a significant change in team morale. Productivity has improved, but more than that, people actually seem to enjoy being here. You have done something remarkable without intending to. I lowered my gaze, unsure how to respond. Gratitude was never meant to be a strategy. It was just survival. However, he continued, I also want to address something that concerns me. He opened a folder on his desk and slid it toward me. Inside was a list of complaints and notes from the past 6 months. Every item pointed back to Clara. Interruptions during meetings, undermining colleagues, creating unnecessary conflict, and of course, the compliance investigation against me. Individually, these incidents seemed minor. Together, Walsh said they reveal a troubling pattern. I looked at the folder, then back at him. What happens now? Walsh folded his hands. We are moving Clara to a different department. Somewhere her skills can be applied without damaging team collaboration. It is not a demotion, but it is a recognition that she is not suited for this environment. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by something else, something almost like sadness. I had never wanted to destroy Clara. I had only wanted her to stop trying to destroy me. The irony, Walsh added with a faint smile, is that her own investigation into you proved the opposite of what she wanted. Your journal showed us how much respect and appreciation you have earned here. It turned her attack into your defense. I thanked him quietly and left his office, the weight of months lifting from my shoulders. That evening, I stayed later than usual. The office was nearly empty, the hum of computers fading into silence. I opened my journal once more. On the fresh page, I wrote, 1. Walsh thanked me for something I never planned. 2. The team is learning to appreciate each other in ways I never thought possible. 3. Clara is leaving our department. I stared at the last line for a long time. It did not feel like victory, at least not the kind movies promise. It felt quieter, like the closing of a door that had been creaking for too long. 2 weeks later, the transfer became official. Clara packed her things one Friday afternoon. She moved with stiff precision, avoiding conversation, avoiding eye contact. People watched, whispered, then turned back to their screens. No one offered to help carry her boxes. No one asked where she was going. She paused once near my desk. Our eyes met. For a heartbeat, I thought she might say something, an apology, a final barb, anything. But she only pressed her lips together, lifted her box, and walked away. The elevator doors closed behind her and the office exhaled. In the weeks that followed, the gratitude practice only grew stronger. What had once been a personal habit was now a shared culture. People who once kept to themselves began opening up. Tensions that had simmered under deadlines seemed to ease. Even Walsh, the man known for his sternness, began starting meetings with genuine warmth. And me, I kept writing. Every night before leaving the office, I opened my notebook and filled a page with the day's small kindnesses. I still recorded Daniel's helpfulness, Alicia's thoughtful gestures, the little moments that made the job more than numbers and deadlines. But I also added something new. Each page ended with the same reminder to myself: the way we treat people matters. Kindness leaves traces, negativity leaves them too. And in the end, the truth always reveals itself. I closed the journal and slid it back into my drawer. Around me, the office buzzed with quiet energy, with a new spirit that had replaced fear with connection. Clara's shadow no longer lingered here, and I understood then that the greatest twist of all was not that I had survived her schemes, but that she had been undone by the very thing she never believed in: kindness. The Monday after Clara left our department felt like the first day of spring after a brutal winter. The office air was lighter, conversations brighter, and even the harsh hum of fluorescent lights seemed less oppressive. People walked with a new ease, no longer glancing nervously at Clara's cubicle to measure her mood before daring to speak. For the first time in months, I could hear genuine laughter ripple across the rows of desks. Someone brought in bagels, another person shared fruit. There were thank you notes pinned to cubicle walls, small reminders that kindness had become part of our daily routine. And yet, under the calm, I could not stop thinking about Clara. She was gone from our floor, but not gone from the company. Somewhere in the building, she was still present, perhaps planning, perhaps brooding. The silence she left behind was not entirely comforting. It was the silence of a storm moving further out to sea, but storms have a way of circling back. That week, I kept my journal close, almost protective. Every evening before I went home, I opened it and wrote my 3 entries. But now the tone felt different. Instead of merely recording small gestures, I began to notice patterns of resilience in my colleagues. I saw how Alicia, once shy, now spoke confidently in meetings after receiving consistent appreciation from the team. I saw how Daniel, who used to hide behind sarcasm, now opened up with genuine warmth. I even saw Walsh relax in ways I never thought possible, cracking jokes, smiling often, starting conversations about more than deadlines. The journal was no longer just mine. It had become a mirror of the entire office's transformation. But then came Thursday afternoon. I had just finished a long call with a client when an unfamiliar number appeared on my phone. The caller ID read Compliance Office. My pulse jumped. For a brief second, I thought Clara had found a way to strike again. "This is London Riley," I answered. "Miss Riley," said the voice on the other end. "We would like to schedule a follow-up regarding the inspection conducted last month. Nothing urgent, just a routine review to ensure proper closure of the file. Are you available tomorrow morning?" I agreed, though my hands trembled as I hung up. Routine review. Two harmless words, but I could not shake the memory of those men rifling through my desk, pulling out my notebook, turning my life into evidence. That evening, I stared at my journal longer than usual. What if they questioned it again? What if Clara, even from another department, had whispered enough poison to resurrect suspicion? I wrote my 3 entries with deliberate care. 1. Daniel stayed late to help me finish the report. 2. Alicia brought tea to my desk without asking. 3. Walsh said he appreciated my persistence on the Miller account. Then, at the bottom of the page, I added a 4th line. Whatever happens tomorrow, the truth will stand. The following morning, 2 officers arrived. Not the same ones as before, but their posture was identical, their expressions calm and unreadable. They asked me to step into a conference room. The room was small, walls lined with glass, blinds drawn for privacy. They sat across from me, opened a file, and began with formal questions about workplace conduct. I answered clearly, my voice steady even though my palms were damp. Then one of them produced my notebook. My breath caught. "Miss Riley," he said, "we have reviewed several pages of this journal. Can you confirm that these entries are personal reflections and not official records?" "Yes," I replied. "They are personal. They were never intended for any professional use." The second officer leaned forward. "Yet they do provide a unique perspective on workplace dynamics. Were you aware of that?" I hesitated. I suppose I became aware when others started noticing. He closed the file. "In fact, Miss Riley, that perspective is precisely why we are here. The department head has expressed interest in exploring whether gratitude practices like yours could be implemented more broadly. We wanted to ask if you would be willing to discuss this as a potential program." I blinked, stunned. "A program?" "Yes," he said. "The positive impact is already evident in your team. Management believes it may be scalable." Relief rushed through me so fast I almost laughed. This was not another trap. This was recognition. When I left the conference room, I carried the notebook like a talisman. The officer's words repeated in my mind. Scalable, program, recognition. I should have felt victorious, but a faint unease still lingered. Because if the company wanted to adopt my practice officially, it meant visibility. It meant exposure. And exposure, I knew, was something Clara could exploit. That afternoon, as I passed the lobby, I saw her. She was standing near the elevators, speaking with someone from another department. Her posture was still perfect, her smile sharp. When her eyes met mine, something flickered across her face. Not defeat, not surrender, something colder. She nodded once as if to say, "I am still here." And I knew then that this story was far from finished. That night I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows of the city lights crawling across my walls. The words of the compliance officers echoed in my head. They wanted to turn my personal habit into a program. They wanted to study it, replicate it, institutionalize it. Part of me felt proud. What had begun as a private defense against Clara's hostility had become a source of strength for the entire office. Now the company itself wanted to adopt it, but another part of me felt uneasy. Once something so personal became official, it would no longer belong entirely to me. It would be measured, evaluated, dissected. And if there was anyone waiting to twist it into something ugly again, it was Clara. The next morning, I arrived at work early. My inbox already contained a meeting invitation titled Workplace Gratitude Pilot Program. It was scheduled for next week. Walsh had added me as a presenter. My stomach flipped. I carried my coffee to my desk and tried to calm myself. Daniel walked by and gave me a smile. "Congratulations," he said. "Word is spreading. People are excited." I thanked him, though my voice was thin. Excitement was not the word I felt. I felt exposed. Later that day, I overheard 2 colleagues talking near the break room. One said, "I heard management is turning London's journal into a project." The other laughed, "Well, I hope she does not start grading us on how thankful we are." They chuckled and walked away, leaving me frozen with the realization that Clara did not even need to speak anymore. Doubt could grow on its own. That afternoon, I saw Clara again. She passed my cubicle on her way to another department. Her expression was calm, almost pleasant, but her eyes locked on mine for half a second too long. It was a look that said, "I know what is happening and I will not let you win so easily." I forced myself to look away. Giving her attention was feeding her power. Instead, I focused on preparing for the upcoming meeting. I gathered notes, examples, and even scanned a few pages of my journal to show how small gestures of appreciation had transformed our team culture. As I worked, I realized that this presentation could either solidify the journal as something positive or leave it vulnerable to new attacks. I decided I would not let Clara, or anyone else, define it for me. When the day of the meeting arrived, I stood in a conference room filled with supervisors, HR representatives, and department leads. Walsh introduced me, speaking briefly about the transformation he had seen in our team since I sent the email. Then he stepped aside and left the spotlight to me. I looked around the room, heart racing, and began. I told them how the journal started, not as a plan, but as a way to survive negativity. I explained how recording 3 positive moments each day had shifted my focus and kept me grounded. I shared stories of colleagues whose simple gestures had lifted heavy days. I spoke about how transparency had turned what was once private into something the whole team embraced. The room listened. Some nodded. Others scribbled notes. I could feel the weight of their attention pressing on me. When I finished, there was silence for a moment. Then one of the HR managers spoke. "Miss Riley, what you describe is not only inspiring but measurable. We believe this could become a structured program to strengthen workplace culture across the company." Applause followed. Not loud but genuine. I let out a breath I had been holding since I walked in. After the meeting, several managers stopped me in the hallway to thank me personally. They said they were impressed, that they wanted to implement similar practices in their departments. I smiled and nodded, but inside I felt both lighter and heavier at once. Because success attracts attention, and attention attracts resistance. That evening, as I packed my bag, I noticed Clara standing across the lobby once more. She was not alone. She was speaking with someone from HR. When she saw me, she gave the faintest smile, the kind that never reaches the eyes. I walked past without slowing, but the thought lingered all night. If the journal was about to become a company program, Clara would not sit back and watch. She would wait for the perfect moment to poison it again. Back home, I opened the notebook and let my pen rest on the page. My 3 entries came easily. 1. Today I shared my story openly with the company. 2. People listened and wanted to learn. 3. The journal may no longer be just mine, but it has the power to protect others. I closed the book and held it in my hands for a long time. Clara could twist, whisper, and manipulate, but what she could never do was erase the truth written in these pages. Still, I knew the coming weeks would test me in new ways. The battle with Clara was not over. It was only changing shape. The weeks after the presentation felt like standing on a fragile bridge suspended over a canyon. Everyone applauded, everyone nodded, everyone praised the new initiative, yet I could sense the tension humming underneath. The gratitude program had become official. HR released memos about pilot testing, managers circulated guidelines, and people began to speak about it as if it were policy rather than practice. On the surface, it looked like a triumph. My journal had grown from a private notebook into the foundation of a company-wide cultural project. But with each passing day, the visibility of it weighed heavier on my shoulders. What once belonged only to me now belonged to everyone, and that meant it could be doubted, distorted, or destroyed. Clara knew this too. I saw her less often since her transfer, but absence did not equal defeat. Every time she appeared, even for a brief visit on our floor, the air shifted. She would glide through the aisles with perfect posture, smiling politely, asking questions that sounded casual but carried edges. "How is the program going?" she would ask someone near my cubicle. "Do you really feel comfortable being written about in a notebook?" she whispered to another. Her words spread like cracks in glass, invisible at first, then widening with pressure. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by my desk again. He leaned closer, voice lowered. "London, she is still at it. Yesterday she asked me whether I had signed any consent forms for being included in your journal. I told her it was ridiculous, but she keeps framing it like a legal issue." Alicia confirmed the same later that day. Clara had approached her in the cafeteria, talking about potential privacy violations and how documenting people without explicit permission could be harassment. I felt my jaw tight. Clara's talent was not in open attacks. It was in planting seeds of fear and letting them grow. She was reshaping the narrative again, turning gratitude into surveillance, kindness into intrusion. That evening, I walked home slower than usual, the city lights blurring through my thoughts. Was Clara right? Could people interpret my journal as invasive? It was only ever meant as a personal practice, never a record of wrongdoing, never a tool of judgment. Yet once suspicion entered the room, truth often lost its clarity. I poured tea, sat by the window, and opened the journal. The entries stared back at me, innocent and warm. Daniel stayed late to help. Alicia shared advice. Walsh recognized effort. Line after line of simple gratitude. Nothing harmful, nothing that deserved suspicion. And still, I could not shake the thought that perception might matter more than intention. That night, I made a decision. If Clara wanted to twist my notebook into a weapon, I would once again strip it of secrecy. I would confront the rumor, not by denying it, but by shining so much light on it that no shadow could survive. The next morning, before work grew noisy, I drafted another message. This time it was longer, carefully written. I wrote that I understood some people might feel uncomfortable about being included in my journal. I repeated that the entries were private and personal, never meant as evaluation. I emphasized that if anyone preferred not to be mentioned, I would respect that immediately. And then I added something new. I invited anyone who wished to begin their own gratitude practice to join me. I offered to share prompts, tips, even blank notebooks if they wanted. I read the email 3 times before sending it. It was not just transparency this time. It was invitation. By noon, my inbox was overflowing again. Messages arrived not only from my department, but from across the company. Some thanked me for my honesty. Others asked where to find journals of their own. A few shared that they had already started writing down moments of appreciation because of my example. One message stood out. It came from Walsh. He wrote, "Miss Riley, your initiative has inspired a cultural shift I have never witnessed in this company before. Gratitude is no longer your private practice. It is becoming our shared language." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Shared language. The phrase filled me with pride and fear at once, because every shared language can be misunderstood. And Clara was fluent in twisting meaning. Sure enough, by the end of the week, I overheard new whispers. This time the doubts sounded subtler, but they carried Clara's fingerprints. "Do you think she is trying to be everyone's moral judge?" Someone asked near the printer. "What if management uses this program to evaluate us?" Another replied. "It feels a little forced," said a third voice. I walked past them with my face calm, but inside, a knot tightened. Clara was still pulling strings from her new department. She had lost one battle, but she had not stopped fighting the war. That evening, I wrote in my journal with a heavier hand than usual. 1. Today many people showed excitement about starting their own journals. 2. Walsh's message reminded me that honesty can inspire others. 3. Clara is still here, even when she is not. I closed the book and placed it gently in the drawer. The war was no longer about me and her. It was about the soul of the company itself. The following Monday, Clara's strategy became clearer. I was in the cafeteria waiting for coffee when I overheard her speaking to 2 employees from another department. She spoke softly, but her words carried an unmistakable sharpness. "It is important to consider boundaries," she said. "Imagine if someone was writing down details about you every day. Would you feel comfortable? Where is the line between appreciation and intrusion?" The 2 employees nodded uncertainly. Clara was not accusing me directly. She was planting questions, shaping perceptions without taking responsibility for the conclusion. I did not interrupt. I simply took my coffee and walked away, but the bitterness of her voice lingered longer than the taste of the drink. That afternoon, Walsh called me into his office. He looked tired, as though the weight of managing both the program and the rumors was pressing on him. "London," he began, "I want to reassure you that the leadership team values your contribution, but I also need to make you aware of concerns. Some employees have expressed discomfort with being written about in a private journal." I stayed calm. "I have already told everyone that I will exclude anyone who requests it." "Has someone asked?" "No," he admitted. "Not one person. But perception matters. If enough people start to worry, it becomes real regardless of fact." I nodded. Clara's fingerprints again. Walsh leaned forward. "I know where this is coming from, but until the noise settles, I advise you to be cautious." I thanked him and left, holding my composure until I was safely back at my desk. That evening, instead of writing alone, I opened a blank notebook and wrote a new kind of entry. Not about moments of gratitude, but about strategy. "Clara thrives on whispers," I wrote. "She never states things outright. She relies on others to carry her suspicions. The antidote to whispers is voice. Clear, open, undeniable voice." As I stared at the page, an idea formed. The next morning, I asked Walsh for permission to host an informal session at lunch. Nothing mandatory, just a voluntary gathering to talk about gratitude and how it had helped me. To my surprise, he agreed. Perhaps he sensed it would ease the tension. When noon came, I expected a handful of curious colleagues. Instead, nearly 30 people arrived. They filled the small conference room, carrying sandwiches, coffees, notebooks. I stood at the front, heart pounding, and began to speak. I told them my story from the beginning, how Clara's surveillance had made me feel cornered, how the journal had started as a survival tool, 3 small notes a day to remind myself that kindness still existed, how it had grown into something larger than I imagined. People listened quietly, some nodding, some taking notes. When I finished, I asked if anyone had questions. A young intern raised her hand. "Did you ever feel like you were spying on people?" The room shifted, waiting for my response. I smiled gently. "No, spying means searching for flaws or secrets. My journal is the opposite. It is about noticing good things people do voluntarily. I never write details about mistakes, never personal matters, only moments of kindness." Alicia spoke next. "I think it is brave that you shared this openly. It made me start my own journal, and it has already changed the way I see my day." Then Daniel added, "It is not surveillance. It is reflection, and we could all benefit from it." The atmosphere warmed. People began sharing their own small moments of gratitude, laughing, encouraging each other. By the time the session ended, the suspicion that had been hovering in the air felt weaker, replaced by something more genuine. Of course, Clara was not present, but I knew she would hear about it. She always did. That evening, as I packed my bag, I noticed her across the lobby again. She stood near the elevators, speaking with someone from HR, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. When she saw me, she tilted her head slightly, as if acknowledging a duel still underway. I held her gaze for a moment before turning away. I had no interest in matching her hostility. My strength was not in confrontation but in consistency. At home, I opened my journal and wrote. 1. Today I told my story to colleagues openly. 2. People listened and supported me. 3. Clara is still watching, but her shadow feels smaller. I closed the book and placed it gently on the table. For the first time, I realized that my revenge was not about winning against Clara. It was about creating a space where her tactics could no longer thrive. A space where her whispers would sound ridiculous against the chorus of voices speaking honestly. And slowly, day by day, that space was becoming real. The weeks after the lunch session felt almost unreal. Gratitude had spread across the office like a quiet revolution. There were sticky notes of encouragement pinned on monitors, small tokens of appreciation left on desks, even a new habit of starting Friday meetings with shout-outs. What had once been my private ritual had become part of the company's bloodstream. But revolutions, no matter how peaceful, always create resistance. Clara had not disappeared. Her body might have moved to another department, but her presence lingered like smoke after a fire. I caught glimpses of her in the lobby, in the cafeteria, sometimes outside the building on her phone, always speaking in that careful, calculated tone. I could never hear her words, but I did not need to. The shift in certain conversations told me enough. Some colleagues still whispered. They wondered aloud if management would use gratitude journals as unofficial evaluations. They questioned whether it was truly voluntary. They asked each other, half joking but half serious, whether every word or gesture might be recorded. Clara was feeding those doubts. I could feel it. One afternoon, Alicia stopped by my desk. She looked troubled. "London, I think you should know something," she said softly. "Clara has been telling people that your journal might violate privacy laws. She claims she has spoken to HR about it." My stomach clenched. "Did HR contact you?" "No," Alicia said quickly. "I do not think they believe her. But she is persistent, and she knows how to phrase things in ways that make people nervous." I thanked her and forced a calm smile. Inside, however, a storm brewed. Clara had failed to destroy me through formal investigations. She had failed to turn my colleagues against me with whispers. Now she was reaching for the language of law, hoping to frame kindness itself as something dangerous. That night, I could not sleep again. I sat at my kitchen table with the journal open, pen in hand, staring at the blank page. For the first time since I began writing, I hesitated. What if Clara succeeded? What if my notebook, the one thing that had protected me, was turned into evidence against me? The thought chilled me. But then I remembered the faces of my colleagues in that lunch session, the warmth in their voices as they shared their own stories of gratitude. Clara could not erase that. I wrote my entries slowly, deliberately. 1. Alicia trusted me enough to warn me. 2. Daniel defended me when someone repeated Clara's rumor. 3. Gratitude is stronger than fear. The following week, HR announced that the pilot program would expand. Each department would be encouraged to experiment with gratitude practices, whether through journals, team acknowledgments, or weekly recognition boards. I watched the announcement ripple across the company. Some were excited, some skeptical, but everyone was talking about it. Gratitude had become official, and Clara was furious. I learned this the hard way one afternoon when Daniel pulled me aside. "London," he said, "I do not want to alarm you, but Clara is trying something new. She has been telling people that your influence is manipulative, that you created this program to gain control over how others see you." I stared at him, stunned. Manipulative. The word hit harder than I expected. Clara was twisting the truth so tightly it almost snapped. Daniel continued, "Most people do not believe her, but she is planting doubt again. You should be careful." I thanked him, though my throat felt tight. Clara's desperation was showing, but desperation can be dangerous. A cornered animal bites hardest. That night, as I walked home through the cool evening air, I realized that I could not play defense forever. Clara would not stop until she exhausted every angle. If I wanted peace, I needed to do something more than react. I needed to turn the mirror back on her completely. At home, I opened my journal and flipped through the pages. Line after line, name after name, each one a reflection of kindness. Then I noticed something I had never fully considered. The absence of Clara was not just a lack of entries, it was a pattern in itself. In over a year of writing, through hundreds of moments, she had never appeared. That absence was louder than any accusation she could make. I tapped my pen against the page and whispered to myself, maybe the best way to fight her is not to fight at all. Maybe the best way is to let her see herself in the mirror she hates most. The next day, the office buzzed with anticipation. HR had officially launched the gratitude program across all departments, and managers were eager to show participation. Bulletin boards appeared in break rooms with colorful sticky notes. People were encouraged to write daily acknowledgments. Even Walsh surprised us by walking into Monday's meeting holding a stack of cards, handing them out so everyone could jot down a thank you before diving into numbers. It should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. The more official the program became, the more opportunities Clara had to twist it. By midweek, the first cracks showed. A colleague from another department approached me hesitantly. "London, can I ask you something? Is it true you suggested this program so you could monitor people?" I nearly dropped the file in my hands. "Who told you that?" He shook his head quickly. "I don't want to get involved, but it's being said." I managed a calm smile, thanked him, and walked away. Inside, my pulse pounded. Clara again? Always Clara. That evening, Daniel messaged me. He had overheard Clara in the cafeteria. She was saying things like, "Gratitude is nice, but it's dangerous when one person controls the narrative." Apparently, she hinted that I was manipulating leadership to secure power. I wanted to scream. Clara had failed at every direct attempt to destroy me, but she had discovered that the more the program grew, the easier it was to spread fear of control. It was a paradox. My success was feeding her weapon. I sat at home that night, staring at the journal on my coffee table. The pages no longer looked like safe walls. They looked like open doors anyone could walk through. For the first time, I considered stopping altogether, closing the notebook, ending the practice. But as I flipped through the entries, my resolve returned. These pages were not about control. They were about survival. They were about hope. If I abandoned them now, Clara would win. I pressed my pen down and wrote harder than ever. 1. Daniel continues to defend me, even when it puts him at risk. 2. Alicia told me today she has never felt so valued in this office. 3. Clara is showing everyone who she really is, whether she realizes it or not. The following week, HR scheduled a company-wide town hall to celebrate the launch of the Gratitude Initiative. Dozens of employees filled the large conference room. Executives sat in the front row, smiling for photographs. Cameras recorded the event for internal broadcasts. I had been asked to speak. Standing at the podium, I felt every eye on me. I told the story again, how the journal began, how it spread, how it changed our team. I could see nods, hear soft applause, feel the warmth of people connecting with the words. Then, halfway through my talk, a voice interrupted. "Excuse me." It was Clara. She stood near the back, arms crossed, posture perfect. "Can I ask a question?" The room shifted, a ripple of tension moving across the rows. Walsh frowned, but before he could intervene, Clara stepped forward. "You've spoken about gratitude as a positive force, but isn't it also true that you have been writing about colleagues without their consent for over a year?" A hush fell over the room. My throat tightened. Clara had chosen her stage perfectly. A public forum, cameras rolling, leadership present. She had nothing to lose. I forced myself to breathe. My mind raced for an answer that could not only protect me but end this war once and for all. I nodded slowly. Yes, Clara, it is true that I have written about colleagues, but only about moments of kindness. Never about flaws, never about secrets, and if anyone ever asked me not to include them, I would have respected it immediately. Clara tilted her head. But did you ever ask permission before writing? Her words sliced the air. I let the silence hang for a moment, then spoke clearly. No, I did not, because gratitude is not about ownership, it is about observation. It is about noticing good in the world and choosing to hold on to it. If kindness requires permission to exist, then it is not kindness at all. The room stirred. Some nodded. Some clapped softly. Walsh's expression softened, pride flickering in his eyes, but Clara was not finished. She raised her voice, cutting through the applause. Or perhaps, London, it was never about gratitude. Perhaps it was always about you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Clara's tone was sharp, but her smile was polished, professional. She had delivered her final dagger in front of everyone. I met her eyes. Calmly, deliberately, I reached into my bag and pulled out the journal. I held it up so everyone could see. This, I said, is not about me. It is about all of us. Every page is filled with your names, your actions, your kindness. If anyone here wants to see their entry, I will show it to them right now. Because the truth does not need hiding. The room erupted in applause. Louder this time, genuine, overwhelming. Clara froze. For the first time since I met her, she seemed unsure of herself. Her perfect mask cracked just enough to reveal something raw beneath fear. I closed the journal gently and placed it back in my bag. Thank you, I said into the microphone, for proving that kindness speaks louder than suspicion. The applause swelled again, drowning out Clara's silence. That evening, alone at home, I wrote in my journal. 1. Today the truth stood in the open. 2. My colleagues chose to believe in light over shadows. 3. Clara's power is breaking. I closed the notebook and whispered to myself. The final storm is coming, and I am ready. The morning after the town hall felt strangely quiet. No one spoke of Clara's outburst directly, but the energy of the office told the story. People smiled more openly, greeted me with warmth, even patted my shoulder as I passed. It was not hero worship, it was solidarity. The applause from yesterday still echoed in the walls. Clara, however, did not appear. Her absence was louder than any words she could have spoken. For the first time, I began to believe the war was ending. Perhaps she had finally seen that her tactics could not survive in the light, but the truth is never that simple. 2 days later, Walsh called me into his office. He looked grave, his usual calm expression shadowed by something I had not seen before. London, closed the door, he said. I obeyed, a knot forming in my stomach. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed emails, internal memos, even screen captures from the company intranet. Every one of them mentioned my name, the gratitude program, and private doubts. These, Walsh said carefully, were compiled into a formal complaint. I looked up, my throat dry. A complaint? Against me, he nodded. It claims that your journal and the program derived from it create a culture of favoritism, manipulation, and coerced positivity. It suggests that colleagues feel pressured to participate, fearing exclusion if they do not. The words blurred in front of me. Coerced positivity. Manipulation. It was Clara's voice disguised as collective concern. Who filed this? I whispered. Walsh's jaw tightened. It came anonymously. My pulse quickened. Anonymous, but I knew. Clara had finally shifted from whispers to formal sabotage. That night I walked the city streets long after sunset, the cool air sharp against my skin. I tried to clear my thoughts, but they tangled tighter with every step. The complaint was dangerous. Unlike rumors, it carried weight. HR would investigate, leadership would question, and everything I had built could crumble. At home, I opened the journal but could not write. My pen hovered, useless. For the first time, the pages felt heavy with responsibility instead of light with hope. And then, like a flicker of lightning, a realization came. If Clara was behind this complaint, and I had no doubt she was, then she had made a mistake. She had left fingerprints this time. Her ambition, her obsession, her need to destroy me would reveal her. I only needed to let the truth surface. The next morning, I walked into the office with steady steps. Daniel caught me near the elevator. London, are you all right? Word is spreading about a complaint. I smiled faintly. I am fine, trust me. But inside, I was preparing for battle. I spent the day reviewing the complaint in detail. Every claim was built on half-truths. My journal coerced participation, but participation had always been voluntary. My program created favoritism, but I had celebrated everyone, from interns to executives. My influence was manipulative, yet all I had ever done was record kindness. Clara's voice was in every sentence, but her overreach made it obvious. That evening, I wrote again. 1. Today I saw through Clara's strategy. 2. Anonymous complaints are still voices, and voices carry traces. 3. The truth is waiting to be revealed. 2 days later, HR summoned me. The investigation had begun. I walked into the conference room, the same one where the officers had once questioned me, and sat across from a panel of 3. They asked their questions calmly. Did I ever force colleagues to be part of my journal? No. Did I ever punish or exclude those who chose not to engage? No. Did I ever share private information? Never. Then came the question that cracked the case open. One of the panelists leaned forward. Miss Riley, do you know who might have raised these concerns? I paused, then spoke clearly. I cannot prove it yet, but the language of the complaint matches phrases that have been circulating for months. They originate from Clara Voss. The panel exchanged glances. One of them noted something in the file. When the meeting ended, I walked out feeling lighter. I had not only defended myself, I had pointed them toward the source. That evening, as I closed my journal, I realized the truth of what was happening. Clara was no longer fighting for influence. She was fighting for survival. She knew her position was slipping, her reputation eroding. The complaint was not strategy, it was desperation. And desperation often leads to mistakes. The investigation stretched over several days, and with each passing hour, the office felt like a stage holding its breath. People tried to act normal, but I could feel the tension in their movements, hear it in the way conversations hushed whenever I walked by. Clara, however, seemed untouched. She glided through the corridors with her perfect posture and practiced smile as though she were already victorious. Every glance she gave me was a silent warning. This time, I will win. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time, I was not afraid. I had learned that Clara's power depended on shadows, on the silence of others. The more she tried to drag me into darkness, the brighter I would shine the light. On the 3rd day of the investigation, HR asked me to attend a follow-up meeting. When I entered the conference room, I expected the same panel as before. Instead, Walsh was there too, standing stiffly at the end of the table. Clara sat opposite me, her expression smooth, unreadable. We are here to address conflicting accounts, one of the HR managers said. Both of you have been mentioned in relation to this complaint. My stomach flipped. Clara had not only filed it, she had positioned herself as part of the investigation. The questions began. Did I keep a private journal? Yes. Did I ever share it maliciously? No. Did I ever coerce anyone to participate? Never. Then Clara's turn came. She leaned forward, voice calm, almost soothing. I only raised concerns because I care about the well-being of my colleagues. I believe Miss Riley's journal, while perhaps well-intentioned, creates pressure. People may feel judged without even realizing it. She spoke as if she were protecting everyone from me, as if she were the savior instead of the saboteur. But then something remarkable happened. Walsh cleared his throat. For weeks, I have reviewed both London's journal entries and the program's outcomes. I have seen nothing but positive influence. If there were manipulation or exclusion, I would have noticed. Instead, I saw productivity rise and morale improve. Clara's mask cracked for the briefest moment. A flicker of irritation flashed in her eyes before she composed herself. I leaned forward. May I speak? The panel nodded. I turned directly to Clara. For over a year, I have written about everyone in this office. About Daniel staying late, about Alicia's generosity, about Walsh's leadership. But not once have I ever written about you. The room fell silent. I let the words hang, then continued. Do you know why? Because in all this time, I have not witnessed a single act of kindness from you worth recording. That is not judgment. That is absence. Clara's lips tightened, but I pressed on. You accuse me of manipulation. You accuse me of control. But the truth is simpler. You resent this journal because it reflects a world in which you have no place. A world where people value compassion over competition, and that terrifies you. The silence deepened. Clara's carefully constructed armor began to splinter. Then came the twist I had never expected. One of the HR managers slid another document onto the table. Clara, it appears we have received additional information regarding your conduct. Clara stiffened. Excuse me? The manager continued. Several colleagues have submitted statements describing a pattern of behavior consistent with harassment, undermining, and manipulation. In fact, some of the very phrases you used in your complaint appear in earlier conversations where you directly targeted Miss Riley. Clara's face drained of color. This investigation, the manager said firmly, is no longer about Miss Riley. It is about you. Gasps rippled across the room. Even Walsh's expression hardened, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. I sat frozen, my heart pounding. Clara had come here believing she could trap me, but the trap had closed on her instead. For the first time since I met her, Clara lost control of the narrative. Her voice trembled as she tried to defend herself. I only wanted fairness. I only wanted to protect, but the panel cut her off. That will be all, Miss Voss. You may leave. She stood slowly, eyes blazing, but when they met mine, I saw something new, not victory, not confidence, only fear. She walked out, the click of her heels echoing like the last beats of a failing drum. That evening, I sat at home with the journal open in front of me. My pen moved steadily. 1. Today the truth began to reveal itself. 2. Clara's shadows are collapsing. 3. Kindness, once doubted, has become the mirror that exposed her. I closed the notebook and held it to my chest. The war with Clara was not completely over, but the balance had shifted. For the first time, she was the one under scrutiny. And for the first time, I felt the ground beneath me steady and strong. It has been 3 months since the investigation ended. Clara left the company quietly, her departure recorded in a brief email from HR that most people skimmed and forgot. I did not celebrate. There was no victory dance, no applause. Only silence, the kind that follows when a storm finally passes. The office is different now. Lighter. Stronger. Gratitude boards fill with color every week, journals rest on desks beside laptops, and kindness has become part of our routine rather than an exception. Walsh jokes more often, Alicia leads team circles, and even Daniel, once the cynic, writes daily notes without fail. As for me, I still keep my little notebook. Every evening I open it and write 3 lines, just as I always have. Some entries are simple, like a colleague holding the elevator. Others are profound, like the day a junior intern told me she stayed because this culture made her feel seen. But now, when I look at the pages, I no longer see only my survival. I see a record of transformation, proof that small words can shape entire rooms, entire lives. One night, as I closed the notebook, I whispered to myself, the real twist was never about Clara. It was about me, about choosing not to let her darkness define me. About learning that kindness, even when doubted, is stronger than suspicion. And in that quiet moment, I finally understood. I did not just survive her. I became more than she ever imagined I could be.